Did we get it? Are we there? Hello? Hey! Welcome in, friends. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Whatever time it might be in your part of the world. Welcome back to the live stream. My name is CSharpFritz, and this is Learn C# with CSharpFritz. How you doing out there, chat room? Folks, I don't see anybody over there chiming in on YouTube. Usually it's pretty busy, pretty hectic over there on YouTube. I don't know if something's disconnected or what out there. How are you doing? I see a couple folks over there on Twitch. Ergenrod, good morning to you. Guacamole, good morning, good morning. Got a nice cup of coffee. Get things started here. There we go. Itchy Sword is here on YouTube. Good to see you. Welcome in. There we go. Now we got some folks. I don't know what happened there. It's like something wasn't connected or something. And let me head over. The chat room. They're right here. There we go. Hello. John, how's it going? John Brownsma. Yes, we're live on the YouTubes. Good morning, Charles Galuli over there on Twitch. Andre Han. Hello, Peter Soybean. Sebayang? I hope I pronounced that right. Hello, Lalo4711. Hi. Babak. Hello. Marcel with a big smiley face. Rindu. Hello. Tetrodotoxina? How's it going there? Welcome. Happy to see a little bit of emotes flying in there. Yeah, with the hi-yo. Very nice. Welcome for first time here. Big hello, Danielle. Hello. You're very welcome for the session. Hello, Animax, Neil. Mangesh, how's it going there? Jens, Nikita, creative videos. There's some creative videos watching. Dat Hung, good to see you. Hello there. This type of session, the discussion we're going to have today, this feels like something that a lot of folks kind of lean into for the proof that it's real. Make sure that I can build an application and I can actually put it somewhere. It's one thing to be able to build something, have it running on a developer laptop or a workstation, but to actually put it somewhere, a web application, put it somewhere out on the cloud. Of course, we're going to take a look at Microsoft Azure today and how you can get that application deployed to Azure, but we're going to make sure that we cover how to build and put your Blazor application inside of a Docker container so you can deploy and run that wherever you'd like. If you've got a home server, if you've got applications running in your data center, you want to run them on a Docker container cluster over there. Maybe you want to run them on somebody else's cloud. That's okay too. We're going to show you how you can get that application running inside a container. It's your channel name. You are a developer. Of course, joking a little bit there. How you doing there, Donfair in Managua, Nicaragua? Good to see you, Moise. Good morning. And I have the clock up there. We'll do a little bit of AMA, answering questions. Happy to chat with you about anything .NET, C#, web development related as we get things started here today. And looking around, there's been a lot that's happening. So I want to make sure that, of course, we acknowledge that, but it's important for me to maintain a little bit of normalcy, to keep things normal, give people a little bit of a distraction, some time to learn, some time to tell some jokes, have a little bit of fun together, a little bit of a distraction from some of the events that are going on out there in the world. Good morning, Moise Aliabas in Orlando. Hello. C. Larby in Accra, Ghana. How you doing there, ED, over on YouTube? We'll go to Brocco's question first here. But the last thing I really want to say about what's going on with the terrible events that are happening in Eastern Europe, my grandmother is 100% Ukrainian, so I am a Ukrainian descendant. It's absolutely terrible, the things that are going on out there. Thoughts and prayers are going out to all the folks that are in Ukraine and that are dealing with the situation going on out there. And if you happen to be in Russia, you got to know they're not striking military folks here. They're going after civilians, and that's not something that anybody can be proud of. So, all the best. Know that the world is supporting you, Ukraine, and we know you're going to pull through this. So, Brocco had a question up there. Can a single .NET process host multiple servers on different ports? You can listen on multiple ports, yes. I don't know if you can stand up multiple web servers. I haven't tried that, but you can definitely stand up hosts that listen to that listen on different ports in the same process. So that's possible, but standing up multiple web servers using our ASP.NET web server called Kestrel, I don't know if you can do that. I don't think you can, but you can definitely get multiple listen to multiple ports. Let me get some music playing here in the background before we go to our next question. This is the Synthwave playlist from Streambeats. Streambeats is a DMCA-free, royalty-free music you can listen to that's made available with playlists on Amazon Music, Apple Music, and Spotify like I'm listening to here today. Thank you so much to Harris Heller for making this music and making it available for us to listen to today. There's music out there for all kinds of genres. I hope you check it out. Animax Neil on YouTube says, I'm a Unity developer. I want to know more about web development with C# to implement multiplayer in my games properly. There's a really great architecture for building web services that comes with ASP.NET Core. There's two different ways to do it. The way that we encourage folks to consider it now is called minimal APIs. And minimal APIs will allow you to write just a little bit of code, and it kind of wires up appropriately to your HTTP methods inside of your program file. We've covered it a couple times here on this channel. You can find some videos about it over on my channel on YouTube, youtube.com/CSharpFritz. I've got about 7 videos out there about it, and I've got a bunch more planned. So that's one direction you can go. The other model that we have available, if you don't want to build in this it's a middleware structured way to write your APIs. You can also build with what are called controllers, and those controllers are a class that have various methods that listen for the different HTTP verbs. So you'll set up a method called get, you can set up another method called post, and it will handle those HTTP verbs appropriately. Now, I'm simplifying for this discussion. There's all kinds of configuration you can drop in there to make that work the way that you need. But you put all of your interactions for the same URL endpoint in the same controller, and you're able to handle those verbs appropriately in one place. So all the best to you, Animax Neil. I have a bunch of other ASP.NET videos if you want to learn more about it here on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/.net. Look for the playlist, Learn C# with CSharpFritz, and each one's about 2 hours. You can go through and see all the content that we're covering. And of course, we've got great learning materials about ASP.NET and building APIs, building microservices over on learn.microsoft.com. Snow BM, hello, good morning to you in Brazil. Are we going to see some code? In about 30 minutes. We're going to see a lot of code. This is the AMA portion, Ask Me Anything portion of the stream. Just going through, welcoming folks in, answering questions, getting some energy built here so we can have some fun writing code in a little bit here. And of course, if you're watching the recording, there's chapters just below. I put chapters in so that if you want to jump right into the lesson, you can skip forward to that. All right. Hello to you, Novell Devolution in Germany. Good to see you. Top Swag Code on Twitch has a question. Have I tried persistent component state? Is it easy to get started with? And is it a must for all Blazor WebAssembly apps? It's not a must for all WebAssembly apps. Persistent component state, if I remember correctly, works with pre-rendering. That's where you're going to be focusing and working with that. So it's not a must, particularly if you're building a static website with Blazor. That's something that we're going to go through and take a look at here today. I would suggest, yeah, not entirely necessary. We'll see a little bit about how pre-rendering works, and not entirely necessary for persisting. Dan asks, what city was the skyline that I show up at the beginning of the stream? That's Philadelphia. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, on the east coast of the United States. Typically, if you see a large map of the United States, they don't include Philadelphia in the list of big cities on the East Coast. They go right from New York City to Washington, and we're right between the two. It's about 2-3 hours north by train, by car, to get into New York City, about another 3 hours south to get into Washington, D.C. Hello to you in India, Animax Neil. Darren! Yeah, love Harris Heller. He's done some great work. Babak, with a comment here, added add DB context factory to a services container, but still getting a second operation was started on this context before a previously completed error in Blazor component. What am I missing? I need to see some code, Babak. I need to see how that's structured. Not a second operation was started on this context. Hang on, you don't want to add DB context factory. You just want to add DB context, not the factory. Add DB context so you get one every time you create it, and you get one per session. DB context factory, I believe, is a singleton. You want to make sure that you get one for the request. Per session, per request into the web server that you're delivering on. How you doing there, Leet Geek? Good to see you over there on Twitch. Bruno, hello to you in Brazil. You love the energy. Thank you so much. That is very kind. Surly Dev says, AMA, emphasis on the last A. Okay, when am I going to dye my beard next? So if you haven't seen over there on my Twitch channel, there's a thing with coloring my beard, and not just coloring my beard black or brown or gray, you know, red, normal male colors that you'd see in a gentleman's beard, in a gentleman's facial hair. We like to color things a little bit different, like blue, purple. Green's not going to work. I've got the chroma key thing going on here. Green's not going to work. You're literally going to miss a part of my face here. You know what I'm saying? So, I've even dyed it pink at one point for an event. There is a fundraising drive coming up in April for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. They do tremendous research on getting cures for kids, for all the childhood diseases, and to take some time on my Twitch channel and offer up some fun incentives, like coloring my beard. I'm happy to do that over there. I even colored my beard purple for the Visual Studio Live, for the Visual Studio launch in 2019. Yeah, I got quite the look from my vice president that day. Like, what are you doing, Jeff? It's branding, that's what it is. But yes, I've even colored it rainbow. That's right, Surly Dev. I've even multi-colors. It looks like a test pattern going across my face. Ryan over here, have you? How do I have my domain set up that it goes to the Azure function before you log in? It goes to the Azure web app. I'm not quite sure what you're asking. You're kind of. I feel like I'm coming in late in the conversation here. What type of hosting are we getting into today? So we're going to cover how to package your application so that I didn't put anything about .NET Publish in there. I should have put .NET Publish. We got to make sure we do .NET Publish. We're gonna cover getting into doing, of course, taking an ASP.NET hosted Blazor application and seeing how that's structured. We'll talk about pre-rendering. We'll talk about a static website and how we can host that with just straight HTML. We'll show you how easy it is to get that loaded into Azure App Service. But I also want to show you what a Azure static website is with Blazor, how easy you can build those, because you can use Azure Functions as your back office services to build and render and deliver content. Really good stuff that you can check out. We'll go through that, and of course we're going to show how to get your Blazor application into a Docker container. I've got some docs on that, and of course I've got some tools that you can use right in Visual Studio that will get you there immediately. Yeah, Ryan, are you thinking about Azure static websites? I'm confused. I'm trying to pick up on the content here. Yeah. How do you have your domain set up so it goes to the Azure function? So you can set up Azure functions so they listen on a domain name, right? You can set up a custom domain name on it. For my applications, so for like hats.csharpfritz.com, that's an Azure static website, and I set up a custom domain name on that. And it returns, we'll see this in a bit here, it returns the Azure functions when it requests to that location, but when you navigate to it and it requests on the normal port 80 or port 443 for secure requests, it delivers the Blazor content there. So I think that's where you're going. So Andrahan asks, any good advice to migrate from old .NET identity to new .NET Core? No. I don't have a real good any good advice for that. Hash passwords and roles. Hash passwords changed. But you should be able to export your users and roles from your old database, put them into the new database, and you're going to need to get folks to re-log in there. It's not a simple move over there. And is it a Noria? Welcome over there on Twitch. Babak asks, is it a good scenario to separate identity database context from the application one? This is a good question. I think it is a good idea because that then gives you the freedom to take your identity database, all the things for folks logging in and accessing, pick that up and move it, pick that up and move it to somewhere else. So everybody logs into your application and they get database A. You can then take identity, put it in a completely separate secured database called database B. That way, if there is a problem on any of your screens that is insecure getting into the database for database A, well, identity is over in database B. You can't reach across and get into it. So I think that's something that you should be aware of and should consider as your application grows and as you consider you might have hundreds of thousands of users. So, hey there, Ancient Coder. Good to see you. Babak asks, do I suggest a DDD aggregate approach, or is it too much for normal apps? So DDD, what Babak is referencing there, is domain-driven design. That's an architecture pattern that you can use to structure and build applications. For a small, normal application, no, I wouldn't use it. If you're building something that's going to be enterprise system scale, where you're going to have mobile apps in different domains of users interacting with your application. The example is you're running a storefront, and so you have the storefront itself, you have the warehouse, you have the accounting folks. These folks all have, as they interact with your system, have different needs and different concerns with how they work with the data. Your customers, they're only reading product data, but the folks in the warehouse, they're modifying stock levels. and they need to see the product data so they know where to reorder, where to place those things. And your accounting folks, they need to be able to go through and look at the orders so they can process for accounts receivable and reorder products so it can be loaded into the warehouse. So different concerns there. That's when you start breaking outside of 2 domains, that's when I start thinking about going to DDD. There are some folks that say, well, go to DDD right from the get-go because you never know. That's technical debt. You're building something and you're building yourself into a corner. There's a difference, I think, between technical debt and building only what you need. If your requirements change significantly in a year, in 2 years, and you didn't know about those requirements when you first designed a system in February 2022, you can't be blamed for that. Those were the requirements. If somebody says to you, well, you didn't build this right, well, that isn't what you needed when we started building the system in February. We're way out in June 2024. Things changed. Well, you're telling me to do something different. Now I've got to do something different. So I avoid DDD unless I clearly see it's a big system coming. And by system meaning multiple domains. Royalty asks, with C# improvements, is the language suitable for hardware bare metal programming? You can do that. Of course, you can build and target a Raspberry Pi. There is the Netduino hardware that you can target. Really, the question is the runtime and being able to build and target directly onto the metal. You can do it. You can look at the IoT sections of the .net website, and there's great instructions there to get you started and pointed at those materials. I don't necessarily think it's the language that's going to carry you there, but more there's smaller versions of the framework that compile and run natively on those devices. Is it Wanma VFX asking, where can you get the hat? GitHub has a store there. Thank you so much, Evan, for sharing that link. How to accomplish the full developer pilot look. I have a pair of headphones here, so when I go over to my other set, I've got a microphone with me, and I do stay wired because the quality is unmatched that comes off of this headset, both listening and using the microphone. And these are Gunnar glasses, Gunnar. If you head over to my Twitch channel, there is a coupon code over there if you're interested, but these are the Gunnar Razor Torpedoes. And I like that they're rimless down here, so I've got lots of visibility and I don't have light sneaking in on my peripheral vision. Lolo asks, I would like to see what is needed to make a pure Blazor app running WebAssembly on the browser and that can be launched from a local directory. So that's what we're calling a Blazor hybrid application, and you can build those and right, I think of that more like an Electron app, right? Visual Studio Code, Discord, Slack. These are all Electron apps. They're a browser that's hosted, and the content that you see inside that browser frame is all HTML that you're interacting with. You're going to be able to do that with .NET MAUI. And actually, you can do that with Windows Forms and WPF applications now. You bring in the WebView 2 component. I think they call it a Blazor WebView. And just put your Blazor application inside there. It'll spin up and you can interact with it. Really good stuff. Ryan on YouTube says, I want the Azure Static web app for influx of traffic. Stay tuned. We're going to get to that. Absolutely, that is one of our topics we're going to get into today in about 16 minutes. M1DW1. Is it common practice? I guess it's common practice for Blazor WebAssembly app with a .NET Web API when using Blazor Server. Do I also use Web API, or is that a misconception on my side? You can use Blazor WebAssembly with any API. You don't necessarily have to use .NET Web API, but it is, you're correct, a common practice because you're in .NET. You're using C#. You are using ASP.NET Core. So why not? Why not use all of the things together? So yes, when using Blazor Web Server, you don't necessarily need to use Web API because when you're on Blazor Server, that's what I meant to say, not Blazor Web Server. When you're on Blazor Server, you don't need to go through the API to query and interact with the database or to interact with other logic, business logic that you might have running on the server. You can call those services directly from inside your Blazor components. So you have a little bit more flexibility with some of those things that you have protected on your server and in your data farm, right? In your server farm hosting environments, like the database at that point. They Wrapped, hello on Twitch. TG asking, is my hat Azure app source code in GitHub? Yes, it is. We'll definitely show that in a little bit. And TG's referring to hats.csharpfritz.com, and that's a little hat website that a website about my hat collection that you go out there and find. How you doing, Exo Square? I'm doing fine. Thank you for asking. Leet Geek asks, what is the minimal API targeted for? What do you mean targeted for? It's built for folks to build APIs. Poneeth, hello. Top Swag Code is here. Any advice for developers who would like to start doing conference talks? Great question. If you're just getting started speaking, teaching, you want to get involved in doing conference talks, speak about what you know best. Start there. It doesn't have to be something unique. It doesn't have to be the introduction to ASP.NET Core for Swift developers. I don't know. You don't need to do something unique. Folks publish blog posts. Folks publish all kinds of material, and they write up their experiences. It's okay to grab a handful of things as long as you give that proper credit and say, put together a talk that's like, top 5 things that I learned and really enjoy about using Blazor. And it's just your experience. These are the things that I like and enjoy, right? Find a topic like that that's something that you know about and you can speak about. Give a couple of demos, and make sure your demos are rock solid, because as a starting speaker, you don't want to lose confidence. You don't want to be taken off your topic because a demo doesn't work the way that you expect it to. I've gotten into this, and after years and years and years, I kind of expect half my demos aren't going to work. You know what I'm saying? Like, the demos are going to break. It's a thing. So I kind of expect that, and I know how to cover that up, and you'll learn that over time. But practice, practice, practice. Get a recording of your demos. Don't try to live code your first couple times that you're presenting. Even record your demo as a video. So if you don't have code samples that you can just drag in and show something running, you can play the video and here it is. This is how it's running, and you can pause the video so you can speak towards the various features. Best of luck to you, Top Swag Code. Happy to answer more questions about that offline. So great stuff for folks. If you want to get involved, get started speaking to the developer community, streaming, writing blog posts, happy to help out with that. Leet Geek, you're right. Over-engineering is the enemy. Exo Square on YouTube says, I want to learn coding because I want to make a game that can interact with viewers via a website, kind of like Jackbox. Jackbox games are tremendous. Any advice on which code to learn to make something like that? So Jackbox Games is an application that's installed and running on folks' PCs, right? And I think about what is it? Trivia murder party, right? There's a bunch of games out there in the Jackbox pack, but you end up building an application that runs locally that has a bunch of animations and things that, of course, the host uses. That application needs to communicate to some kind of a server. When you think about a server, that's something like ASP.NET Core. And that interaction is going to be something that you need to keep open and connected the whole time. Additionally, those players that are connecting in and using their phones, they're getting something from that server because it's just in their browser, and they're doing two-way communication back and forth. So, with that scenario in mind, you can take a look at something like WPF, Windows Forms, to build that application. But I really think .NET MAUI with Blazor Hybrid is going to be a great way to go with that, because you'll be able to build and target and bring in web content that's image-based and has all kinds of neat interactions for you on the web, doing animations with CSS to make that really cool inside that main application. You need that server component you build with ASP.NET Core, and to do that live connection back to that main host application and each of the individual players, you want to learn something called SignalR or WebSockets. SignalR is the ASP.NET technology that scales down and up appropriately for those folks that are connected, and it uses different technologies as an abstraction above WebSockets to get a live connection, okay? Those would be the things that I would take a look at. All the best to you, ExoSquare. Good luck with that. Hey there, Spaceboy103 on Twitch. We're just going through a little bit of AMA for about the next 9 minutes here. Ali Al-Ghanim, how do I upload a file to a database? If you're building something with an API, you can, particularly with ASP.NET controllers, building an API using ASP.NET Core with .NET 6, you can receive a file as an input type. I forget, it's like from file or something is the attribute that you put on a method that you're going to receive, a post method that you'll receive from the browser. Now, you need to set up the post form inside the browser. There's really good documentation on how to do this on docs.microsoft.com. Head over there, and I'm sure there's an article that'll fit exactly your needs. Royalty on YouTube asks, what's the difference between .NET MAUI and Flutter? Flutter natively controls every pixel which is performant. Is MAUI similar to that? Yes, it is. .NET MAUI will compile and run and deliver content with .NET MAUI controls that runs natively. You cross-compile, and it will compile and run natively on iOS, Android, Windows, or Mac OS. There are also options to embed a web browser there so that you can take your web application and run it natively over there, like an Electron type of application. Is Microsoft planning to build component libraries for Blazor, asks LeetGeek, like it does for WinForms and WPF? There is it the Fluent component library? You can check that out. It's already out there for folks to use. M1D1, oh, good, glad to hear it. Babak, time to hosting, accessing an API on another machine. I don't know what you're asking. Yeah, thank you, Brocco Dev, chiming in there on Twitch. Atomic Super Geek works in identity security. Always suggest to people you don't put identity in a database. Now, I agree with that. Yes, use LDAP or identity or Active Directory Identity Store. Yes, there's optimizations that are being done there that will handle that best. When you put identity in the database, there's ways to attack the database that those services, Active Directory, LDAP, can handle a little bit better. You're right, Atomic Super Geek. Evan Weeks points out there's a ton of third-party component libraries for Blazor. The big five commercial vendors there is a little bit of a free tier that you can check out. but you can get dozens of components when you buy a library from them. And of course, there's open source libraries as well. TG says, looks like F# functional programming is Python-like syntax, more simple and modern. Is it the future programming language trend? I don't know if it's the future programming language trend. There's definitely folks that enjoy that. Sure. But it is interesting. You can go back to .NET Conf and no, we had a .NET Conf focus on F# last summer. There's a video playlist on the .NET YouTube channel, youtube.com/.net. I hosted a discussion, actually a little bit of a training session, between Don Syme, the inventor of F#, and Guido van Rossum, the inventor of Python. And Don is teaching Guido how to do F#. And I mean, these are two gentlemen who know their programming languages. They know these programming concepts for structuring and building applications. And to see that interaction, how similar these are, and to hear how easily Guido picks up and runs with F#, I think you're going to be encouraged when you see that. Omnicini on Twitch asks, how can I work with Blazor and a .NET CMS? You can. I don't know what you're asking there. Surly Dev saw a conference talk once that was a recorded video for the coding segments. Yeah, it's as a fallback, as something to make sure that you have the code working every time. Works great. And you'll see we do that for conferences. There are, we call them shadow machines that are set up. So if the presenter on stage, if something happens to their machine, they can hit a KVM switch. They can hit a keyboard video monitor switch, and now they're on a backup machine that's configured, and somebody in off stage has been keeping up with exactly what they've been doing, and it's at the same state as where they left off on the previous machine, and they can continue and start working there. So we do that, and if that doesn't work, then we have a recorded video of the demo that we can go over to. So we make sure that those things work. Ragathian, even when you do live code, keep a Git history with all the steps so you can do a mixed reset towards the next step of the demo. Exactly. So I have a number of demos that I repeat, and I want to make sure I get exactly right. So I have a series of tags that I set up inside the repository, and I do tags so I can branch and continue, fix something on the state of this demo, and just move the tag to the next version of that. So when I come back next time, I just, okay, let's move forward to the next state of the demo, and it's git checkout 1, git checkout 2, and I just number them. Here's where I'm going in the demo. Or shadow properties supported in the new entity framework. You know what? I need to go read into it, shadow properties in entity framework a little bit. I thought we could do stuff like that. I don't know. I would need to go look. I would need to go look that up. My apologies. I don't have an answer right now. Yep, Mud Blazor is out there as well. Cool's Boy points that out. Ali Al-Ghanim, uploading a file using .NET 5 without using an API using EF Core. So you're uploading to like a Razor page. You're still going to have an on post, and you need to receive that file. There's an attribute that you can put on there that'll turn it on, so it will inspect and receive that stream of content. TG created an ASP.NET Core app with a Docker container. It runs in Visual Studio and in the Docker client, but when I use that image to recreate a new container and run in Docker client, it failed. So that's interesting. Because I do that a lot, and we're actually going to do that a little bit here. I would need to see a little bit about the errors to know a little bit more what's going on there. Is it CodePia? Hello, welcome. Thank you so much for the kind words there. What is the learning path to master .NET, especially web applications? You're going to build with ASP.NET Core. You're going to build APIs. You're going to build Razor pages. You're going to learn a lot about Razor templating. And you're going to get into Blazor. Take a look at learnmicrosoft.com. It's a great starting point for folks. But to master it, I would say you need to build applications that have APIs, that have rich user interfaces that you're going to take and use in different model applications, whether it's running on a mobile browser or a tablet browser or on somebody's desktop. So, best UI scaffolding tool for Blazor and Entity Framework. I don't think we have a UI scaffolding tool for Blazor and Entity Framework just yet. So, yeah, thank you, Evan Weeks, chiming in about Sync Fusion. How do you pass a value from HTML to CSS? Well, you don't really pass values between HTML and CSS. If you need to get content into your styles, you set up a style block in your HTML and you code it there. Can I extend a CMS built on MVC with Blazor? Sure you can, Omnicini. Absolutely. There's you can use it's the component tag helper that you can use in MVC Razor views to include and reference a Blazor component. Can you still use Docker? I thought they changed the terms of service. Yes, you can use Docker. There are requirements for folks. If you are in a large enterprise, you need to get appropriate licensing. But if you are learning about Docker, if you're working as a hobbyist, it's a personal thing that you're using, you can absolutely use Docker. So, all right. We are at the end of our AMA time. Thank you so much, friends, for chiming in, for joining us. I'm happy to answer all those questions. And, of course, I'll be back tomorrow over on my stream where anything goes with the AMA. Happy to answer questions all throughout that stream. Check me out over there on twitch.tv/CSharpFritz. And tomorrow's March 1st. Tomorrow's the start of what I call Minimal March. Let me see here. Okay. And Minimal March means, I'm sorry, I got messages here from the family. Minimal March means I'm going to be doing development on the Twitch stream without any Microsoft tools. We're going to be building with .NET, building with Blazor, building with Azure, and we're going to use a Mac. We're going to use a Linux-based laptop. We're going to use a Raspberry Pi, and we're even going to use a Google Chromebook. All of that coming up all month of March over on my channel, Twitch TV/CSharpFritz, because I want to make sure that you know wherever it is that you're coding, wherever it is you're building applications, you can be successful. All right. Let's get things started here. Let me get things turned over. There we go. Turned over to the other microphone. Moving out of there. Getting things started. Robert Tables is here. My goodness, don't let that gentleman near your database. It might make some things disappear there. Let's take a look. We're going to get started. Yep, the teleprompter's all ready to go. I am going to grab the phone, grab the coffee. MacBook with VS Code? No. No, we're going to be at the command line. We will be over there working. Let's get things turned over and head over to the other scene so we can start learning about hosting, publishing, and building applications with Blazor. All right. Yeah, we're going to head over there right now. Oh, good. Don't spill the coffee, Fritz. Don't spill the coffee. Oh, that would be terrible. Here I am over here. Hello, friends. It's me. It's Jeff. I'm over here. And seriously? Is it me or did that go fuzzy? The focus on this camera goes out on me. I don't get it. Right? Did we do better? Yeah, there we go. All right, now we're focused. Good to see you, friends, back over here. The weather in Philadelphia, it's always sunny in Philadelphia. I have Visual Studio 2022 open here. Now, I didn't write a lot of content into the session plan for today. We're going to make sure we come back to that page. But let's get over to github.com, CSharpFritz, C# with CSharpFritz. And this is a new session that I added into the mix. It is down here, hosting and deployment. That's where we're going to be working today. So github.com/CSharpFritz/C# with CSharpFritz. There it is. You can see it right up there. And we're going to get in. We're going to talk about hosting, deployment. I forgot to add .NET Publish in here. We should do something with that and get into that here. So, all right. We've been building Blazor applications for the last month or so, and we've learned a lot about how to get our applications up and running in development mode, right? There's nothing to it, whether it's Blazor WebAssembly or Blazor Server. You run .NET New in the command line, and boom, you're off and running. So what happens when I want to take all that developer code out and get it shipped out to my favorite hosting service? Whether that's an internal web server or a cloud service. How do I do that? How do I get this stuff moving around out there? Yeah, that's right. We're going to be using VI next time over on my channel to go work with that. All right. Good. We're good there. Good. So, first application type that we had been building is this idea of a static website, right? Now, a static website is a website that doesn't have any moving pieces on the server, right? I don't have any APIs. It's literally just the HTML. Now, folks that build with Vue or Angular or React or any other JavaScript framework, you're used to seeing this where you build, some HTML, you compile up some JavaScript, and you ship the whole thing to the browser, and it interacts and runs there. There's also folks that run something called the Jam Stack, where you have JavaScript, APIs, and what's the M again? Mongo? It's not Mongo. Modules? Metadata. Markup. That's what it is. It's markup. I'm sorry. I knew what the M was. And they're able to interact and have some API behind the scenes that work. Well, starting with .NET Conf in November 2021, we've kind of coined a similar thing called BAM Stack for Blazor. Blazor? Yeah. APIs and markup. We're going to see a little bit about that here. Even a Raspberry Pi. Yeah, we'll do Raspberry Pi as well. So I can build, right, of course, a static website, and I have one sitting here. I labeled Blazor PWA. Right? So if I go into this folder, no, I should open that solution. Did I even add all of these projects? I think it's already in there. Blazor PWA. .NET solution add. No, I didn't do those. We're good. All right, so let me open this project here. I'm going to go to that folder, and we'll take a look about getting things started, built here, and deployed as a progressive web application. So this is the okay. Let's take a look. See here. So I thought I opened the solution. I thought I opened it. Where is it? There it is. All right. So here's my progressive web application over here. It looks like, it feels like, and it is all of the things that you're used to seeing inside of a Blazor application. I have pages. I have my program over here that defines and has, right, all the things to configure Blazor. There's no server here. This is all, right? This is all a WebAssembly host. And it's configuring my Blazor app, and it also has this head outlet here, so I can, right, put title and other things into the head of my application. Finally, I have an HTTP client here so that I can get back to the server that this may be hosted on. Now, I can, of course, request things from other locations, but the base address that this HTTP client makes available is the server that this is hosted on, right? So if you want to reach back and get a JSON file or something that's sitting on disk, you can do that here. Now, that's fine. That starts things up. That runs here, but this is a progressive web app, and it's a static app. There is no server pieces here. You can deploy this and run a little web server that doesn't know what ASP.NET Core is. Run that wherever you'd like out on the internet. And this machine is slowly getting slower, significantly slower. Like, there it goes. Thanks. And come on. There it is, right? So we're used to seeing this kind of startup application, but it has all the things for me to use this as a progressive web app. So right there is a reference to a service worker. So I can use all the progressive web app things that I'm used to seeing because I have a service worker. Now, where's that coming from? And you can see Visual Studio injected some code here so that we can refresh and interact with. So this means, yeah, thanks. Go away. I can install this as a progressive web app here, right? Install this site as an app. Because it's built with the progressive web app capabilities, I can make this available and put it down, and it will cache all of my Blazor content on disk for you. Not only does it do that, but it will also do that regular check to make sure that content is up to date. How do we get there? How do we get to this being a progressive web app and all of this content being installable and deployable for folks to use as an application? So let me show you the command that's out here that I listed right there. When you build your application, if you do a .NET new command to construct the application, you pass in -O, your project name, but there's a final switch that you can pass here, -P true. This says make this a progressive web app. Put in the extensions and the default code that I need so that I can deliver this and have it cache and store things on my visitors' devices. What that adds inside of here are a couple things inside of my project file. So not only do I have the things here to configure .NET, but I've got a service worker asset manifest. So it knows what things to load and that it's going to deliver for the service worker to cache and put down locally. And it's going to generate and maintain a file here called service worker assets JavaScript. We've got our regular item groups here, and there's the service worker declared here with, it's including service worker JS, and there's a published version of it here. Now, this is important because you don't, while you're building the application, you don't want to cache things in the browser. That's going to be weird, because if you're caching things in the browser with that long cache time as a progressive web app, you're not going to be able to see those changes as you make them in the browser. It breaks the developer experience, because when we cache for progressive web apps, we want that very long cache on things. So the CSS, the HTML, the markup sticks around for a real long time on the desktop, on the phone, on the tablet, right? You don't want to reload that every time. You only want to reload changes and data. So by setting this up like this, and this is all done for you by default, it's specifying to the build process, here's where you're going to place that content so that it carries forward into your application. Questions here in chat. Let me pause for a second. Sub Lyman says ASP.NET, Razor web development here. Excited to see some new things. Fantastic. Glad to hear it. Lycan 1534, good day to you. Lethal Error on Twitch asks, does authorization and authentication remain secure in a progressive web app? It does. You will not be able to authorize and authenticate when folks are offline. You don't know if they're authorized or not, right? Somebody may have downloaded and put content on their machine, and if you revoke their access while they're in a disconnected state, you don't know that, right? So it's important when you're building those features where you're going to authorize access to something, where you're going to authenticate and have somebody gain access, you need to make sure that you force a request back to the server to ensure that you verify that folks are allowed to have access to it. You can then behave appropriately if you're offline and raise a message, hey, this service isn't available right now, and behave appropriately. So, good question. Thank you so much. And handling things that are offline, I believe you would do that inside of AppRazor when you route folks to the not found here. You can't find that content. You're trying to go somewhere that I can't reach. You're going to want to handle that appropriately with using something like not found over here. Okay. So I showed you where these things land, how it structures this. If we take a look inside the www root folder here, right, you see over here images and things that it puts in here by default. We get a manifest JSON that is delivered for us that's kind of standard. It kind of has, it just kind of fills in some of the template information about this application, right? There's the name of my application for the name and the short name up at the top of the manifest. But start URL is pretty much the same for everybody that builds these. Display standalone, but here set your colors if you want to change the colors of your app. Icons, right? The icons that'll be installed and available for this application when it runs on a phone, on a desktop, whatever. There was also, so manifest you just kind of copy in. But service worker, this is the code that you maintain, where if you want to have it do some other things when a fetch operation occurred, when the network state changes, you can add those capabilities here. But in development, always fetch from the network. Don't intercept or do anything there, or else you're going to run into some issues. The published version, though, has a bunch of other things going on, right? I mean, look at this. Service worker assets, it's going to bring in this JavaScript file that says, here's all the things to load and maintain. And it has event listeners for install, activating, and fetch. You don't need to touch this file, but this is the default file that you get delivered to you when you generate a new application. So you can build and deliver that application and get that PWA experience. So let's do this. Let's activate and take that application that I had running in my browser. Where is it? Over here. And let's do that install experience. I'm going to move this over just a smidge so you can see. Install this site as an app. It'll take a second here. Where'd it go? Hello? Do it. I don't see you yet. Ah, come on, man. I have this working on a handful of other Edge apps. No, it's not. It didn't install. Because it should click through and jump right into a new browser. Let me restart. Just to make sure that I got it right. Let it finish loading. Apps. Install this site as an app. No, it's not going to do it for me. Let's try it over in Chrome. See if I got something wrong. To verify it's not the browser and something misbehaving there. There it is. It's already brought up the little install jammy. Yep, install. Okay. I'm going to chalk that up to something in the version of Edge that I have there. But now it appears and looks like an application, and when I go down to my address bar, move it over there, you can see I even get the icon loaded up, and it appears there that was specified in my manifest. So you can install, you can build and deliver this, and that works great if you have an application that you want to deliver and you don't want to have to manage the version of it for folks who are in that disconnected state. Blazor is already going to give you that rich client-side caching, significant caching that runs in the browser, so it's not constantly coming back to get Blazor content, Blazor logic. But when you put it into a PWA, you get it caching even more. It's really not going to go back for things until you actually tell it to fetch, refresh, and go interact with, and force it to go there. And by default, when you run HTTP client interactions, it will go back to the server to go get that data. And you can specify other data for it to cache from the server if you want it to be. So that's a little bit about Blazor with PWAs. Jason is here from YouTube and asks, it would be cool if myself and James Montemagno did a live Q&A once Maui Hybrid is in preview. Well, it's going to be released. We should see a release candidate coming out here in the next month or two, but it will be released. We're looking at May is when they're saying it's going to be released. That was the word from our friend David Orton now in a couple of events over the last week or two. That's when we're expecting to see it. Jason is here. Hello to you in Kenya. Welcome. So, Blazor with a PWA, when we publish this, now I kept saying, I need to show .NET Publish. If I go into that folder, come on, Fritz. And I run .NET Publish, and I'm going to specify a distribution folder to put that into. What this does, unlike what we've seen when we've worked with Blazor otherwise, this goes through and not only compiles into a DLL and grabs all of the web content, puts that into a folder, and now this is where that next step comes in for publishing. It's going to optimize assemblies for size. So it's going to link those DLLs. It's going to do some tree shaking to remove any DLLs that you're not using, references that aren't needed, features that aren't required. It's going to remove all of those things to optimize for the smallest DLLs possible. And then it compresses those DLLs so that they're even smaller for delivering into the browser. And now you see it's available inside of this dist folder that I have here. If I go into that folder, you see I have just a www root and a web config. The web config is really there to tell IIS, you're not executing anything. Remove all of those handlers, but do make sure you light up these binary handlers that we serve from inside of our application. Okay. So really, it's to set up IIS, Windows Internet Information Server, as a server that's ready to serve just those binary files, right? Octet streams, WebAssembly content, and the content that's inside the www root folder. So you can take this folder and put it right inside of IIS, and it will start up and you'll be able to navigate and start interacting with this application. But let's take a look inside that www root folder. I see a comment there from Babak on YouTube. How does offline data, how would that be synced to the database? So that's where you need to get smart. You need to figure out the smarts with your data so that it knows when to sync. So when that fetch operation takes place, you can tell it to cache things locally, right? There's ways in the progressive web apps to detect when there is a change in data. I'm not familiar with it to talk towards it right now. I haven't done it in a while, but you can, if you're telling it to cache some JSON data or something on disk, you can tell it when and how to detect if there is new data to sync, and the web browser with that service worker will automatically get that data for you. All right, so here's what's in that www root folder, and it looks like the stuff for a standard website, except for that bit right there, framework. Okay, let's go into that folder. Now we see the guts of our Blazor application, right? Here's all the DLLs. Now, what's interesting about this is not only do we have DLLs like this one for the URI, right? But it's also Brotli compressed and gzip compressed. This way, if your browser supports it, if the folks that are browsing to your application, if their browser supports the Brotli more aggressive compression, we can serve this version. If it doesn't, well, it's been a standard for a long time. We can support the gzipped version, and folks can interact with it appropriately there. Ads 39939 on YouTube asks, do progressive web apps download new DLLs from the server if they are updated? So the manifest that's generated that contains the list of all these things updates, and there's a hash that's provided in there, and because that hash is different from what's on disk on inside the browsers, it will know to go and refresh those DLLs to sync those DLLs. All right. So we have all of our DLLs here, and you can clearly see if I do a directory, right? Oh, come on, it's not going to show me the file size, total file size. Come on now, do I have to go back to old school DOS directory? There it is, 15 meg total for this, but you've got 3 copies of each DLL, right? And we've got things like system text in there by itself is 295K, but when it's compressed and they get the Brotli version of it, it's only 97. So you see benefits from using these tools and compressing and getting this step down so you get the compressed version of these DLLs. TG asks, which files have the UI and HTML code? So if I go grab Blazor PWA star, there they are. The Razor content, the Razor templates, and all of the UI management code are right there in that DLL, the 19K. So you see here, right, the gzip version, 8K, 7K for the Brotli compressed version. But of course, that runs on top of all of these other things. We need the rest of our .NET runtime to support and drive that application. All right. So we've built a PWA, we've published it. There's other ways to build static websites. And the way that we're promoting as what we think is really beneficial and easy to work with is this BAM stack concept. Jamstack folks working with JavaScript APIs and markup, you can build and deliver that and have basically a dummy web server and work with serverless APIs. Things like Azure Functions, or over on AWS, they call them Lambdas, to deliver content, to interact with the database, or to properly hit other APIs that you may want to interact with. How do we do that with Blazor? How do we deploy that with Blazor? And I've published this content here, right? I've talked about I can move this to different places. I forgot to mention you can also publish from inside Visual Studio. Right-click on the project and choose Publish. And it walks you through this really nice wizard that says, well, where would you like to send this content? Do you want to send it to Azure? Do you want to put it in a folder or an FTP server, IIS web server? Or do you want to import a profile that says where and how to deliver it? You can walk through this and it'll help you put it on Azure App Service, or maybe compress it down so it runs on a web server and you can stand up a virtual machine on your favorite hosting service and copy it out and run it out there. It's your choice, but the publish profile, the publish processes that you go through here, you can turn into GitHub Actions. And at that point, what's really great is you can set it up to trigger and do that deployment every time that there's an update inside the repository. Good stuff. It's really good stuff for folks to use. Babak asks, does it affect data integrity back in the database when you do synchronization? Yes. You definitely could run into data integrity issues because that synchronization that's happening, things have changed between when they were working with data on this machine and when the server was last updated. If you have multiple users and they're both trying to update, right? Two users are trying to update the same data point, and the person who is online updates and sets some value, and Jeff, who's over here and wasn't connected, makes a different change. When it syncs, well, who wins? Well, that's a different issue that database administrators can help you with, but you're going to need eventually, perhaps, a human to step in and resolve, well, which one is the correct data to save. So definitely something to be aware of when you get into those occasionally connected scenarios. So typically folks that are working with PWAs offline are doing something where they're kind of isolated on their own data, right? You're isolated on your own data, or you're doing a lot of read content, right? And almost brochureware that's going on there, so that yes, it's installed and running locally, but it's just getting data from a server. And when it's not able to push and connect and do something on the server, it returns an appropriate service unavailable message. Regathian with a question here on Twitch, asking, what kind of tool would I use to do Brotli compression? I have an app settings JSON that I'd like to modify in my release pipeline. Well, app settings JSON, you can modify. That is available. That is on disk. Let me come back here. There's framework. And app settings inside of a Blazor WebAssembly application will be running in the browser. So you're not going to compress it. It's a JSON file that just is sitting on disk. You're going to put it inside of one of these folders, maybe in CSS, maybe in sample data. But you're just going to have it sitting here, and you're going to read that file off of the server or off of disk when it's cached as a PWA. TG asks, is there Blazor WASM also packed inside the DLL? Yes. So if I go back into here, .NET WASM, there it is. So that's how it's bootstrapping and getting everything started and running, is right there. All right. Not something you typically have to work with, but that gets that'll get you started and working. Sorry, we're not talking about NPM right now. If anybody else wants to help out with that question on Twitch, you can help out with that. And yes, you have an older version of NPM. Yep, you need to update it, and you need to be an admin in order to do that update. So, yeah, you're gonna need a sudo or open a administrator command prompt if you're on Windows. All right. Let's move in. Let's talk about Azure static websites and this BAM stack concept. So I have a link in the documentation to take you right into, where'd it go? The repository with the templates for building with Blazor a static website. Now, an Azure static website has 2 parts. It has the Blazor version of the website that looks just like the static website we just built, and it has an Azure Functions app that's a separate project sitting there. But through the capabilities of GitHub and how we can package and deploy out to Azure, it actually delivers as one application. They get put together and delivered to one server as one application that runs with very low overhead. You only get charged for the functions that are running. The number of folks that come to and browse and interact with your application could be millions. It doesn't matter. Delivering that content is free. There is a bandwidth limit that once you hit that bandwidth, you'll start to see some charge for serving after, I forget how many gigabytes. You'll start seeing a very small charge, but it's minimal. So this is an interesting strategy to build and deliver applications. Let me show you what this template looks like to start. Now the template is sitting here in GitHub because it's easy to iterate on, it's easy to grow, it's easy to fork from here and stay on GitHub to build and interact with the application. So there are in the template now, there are 4 projects. There's your API. There's your API if you want to build it in what they call isolated mode. There we go. So isolated means it runs as a standalone application, and the functions runtime isn't hosting it. You're doing the hosting of this. Slight difference in behavior and can deliver different memory interactions. So there's the client application here. That's the Blazor application in there. And there's also a project here called Shared. And Shared has content, like a class library that you want to share between both your Blazor WebAssembly and your API. So this has the weather demo in it, the weather demo that we've seen a couple times here. I don't have it running here anymore. And that weather demo where it shows, well, here's a list of fake weather reports. That Shared project has a weather forecast object in it. And if we click into that, right, this is a simple class. It's a model that we're sharing between our API and our Blazor application. Makes sense. So let's take a look. I haven't... The way to use this template is to click the big ugly green use this template button, and it'll ask you, hey, let's put this down somewhere in your GitHub account with an appropriate new name, and give it a description where you'd like it to, is it a public project, is it a private project, and it will effectively just copy all the contents from that repository into your repository, at which point you can start working with it. Now, for the purposes of having this isolated and ready to share in one place, I put together that model inside of the folder for the content that we're talking about today. So Blazor Starter main here is the Azure static website. It's the same content, okay? I wanted to isolate it, have a copy of it sitting here. So if you cloned the repository, it's right there. You can just grab and take a look at these things. So let me go into Visual Studio and let's take a look at these parts of the application. Now, there's API and API isolated. You don't have to use both. Choose one and work with it. They both do the same thing. They're both very, very similar. I'm going to work with just API. And there is a function in here. It's static class weather forecast function. There's a little private method here to generate summary information. But here's that Azure function. Okay. Put carriage return there. So this is going to run under the name weather forecast, and it's a C# method. It's just going to return some data. There's an HTTP trigger here. So somebody's going to make a request into here at weather forecast to get data with the get verb, right? You could also have, of course, put, post, and delete here. But you comma separate them. I think it's comma separated, or it's an array. I forget which way it is. Right? This is... Yeah, it's an array. So you would put quotes, commas in there. Right, so do something like this. And you can have it handle both get and post. But this is just getting that weather forecast. And right, it looks like a regular C# method that you would use inside of your APIs that you might build. I'm going to go get a random number. I'm just going to randomly create a weather forecast object and just calculate some random information for the temperature. Summary, we're just going to go grab an appropriate summary from that method up top, and I'm going to return that enumerable, that collection right here. That's it. As a serverless function, right? I mean, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines of code to return this data. Azure functions as a method to get data, return, interact with the database, real easy to do, and it keeps me focused as a developer on just do this one thing. And Azure functions will scale up and down the number of processes that can handle these requests based on the number of folks that are connecting. So scaling with Azure functions is something that I don't have to worry about as a developer, as an operator. It just runs for me. Now I can set maximums on how many instances of this thing are running. That's fine. I can set a minimum startup number and control that, but it will manage that for me so I don't have to worry about scaling. Really great stuff that I think makes development with serverless technologies so much easier for us. The other side of this, the client application, it's pretty simple. It's the same client app that we're used to seeing again and again. Look, even the program to configure this, the base address is the exact same base address for this client app, right? And let me put this check in here. There we go. Yeah, that went there. Okay. We can put another. Cool. Right? So create a new HTTP client so it knows where to go to connect to that API, where that API project is. If there is an API prefix, well, let's use that, right? And you can see there is in here. Nope, no, don't. This one doesn't have one built, does it? No. There, the server is specified up there. But I wasn't sure they moved some of these things on me. If that address isn't specified, then we're going to use the base address of wherever this thing is hosted. So that means that, right, just like I was saying, when this gets pushed into production, it's going to drive those two halves together, both the Blazor part and the web API. So they're running, I'm sorry, the Azure function. So they're running on the same server at the same address, and it will be able to respond to those API calls at that address specified on Azure. Let me go to TG has a question here. I would think your Blazor assembly web app offline from the web server, but you still have the internet access in your local with CDNs. What was the question here? Oh, Amal asked, would it break the offline app if I use CDNs for CSS and JavaScript? Nope, wouldn't break it. Nope. You should be fine with that. How you doing there? Kanawana Gasaki Yoko asks, will we discuss server pre-render, or we already talked about it? We're going to get there in just a little bit. Murray on Twitch asks, can we manage configurations based on different environments, test and production? So when you're building a WebAssembly, you can have it pick up and it will respect the .development name here if it's the development version of the application. When you publish, you're in the release mode and it will ignore this. So you can put content in here if you want it to behave differently in your debug application, in your development application, and it will, like I said, get ignored when you go out there. Now, the way this application runs, because on my development system here, it's running as two separate applications. It's going to run inside my Azure Functions emulator. And it's going to also run inside of a web application here on this system. So let me set up, and I can tell it to run those two applications here. I'm going to set my startup projects, and I want this to start both, yes, multiple projects. Start the API and start the client. So now you see up there it says multiple startup projects. I'll click start, and it's going to build and launch both, like I said, both the Azure Functions emulator and the web server. So here, func.exe, this is the Azure Functions emulator. There it is. Yes, allow that to run. Thank you. And if you've been watching my stream, you've seen me working on an Azure static app over there called ClipTalk that's built and uses this technology. I typically run the two apps separately, so I can do hot reload separately between them. So there it is. There's my web app running. Here's the Azure Functions. And if I click down into Fetch Data, do you see it back there? It still hasn't returned and painted the data on the screen. Why not? Why not? It says it executed it. Where's my data? Where's my data, man? Yes, open DevTools. Don't show this again. Close this. Where's my data, man? It's up here. Network. And give me fetch data. That's where it went. It says it executed it. What do you mean you didn't get data? And it returned missing allow origin header. Oh. Yeah. Well, that's not right. Well, I think we got some feedback for the Azure Static site. Yes, it's cores. It's always cores. You're right. So we need to go back over to that kind of blows me away that we got hit with a cores error on the API. Yeah, it's right there. Cores. Allow star. Actually, yeah, turn that on. I want those local settings. Try that again. Why weren't those by default on there? Let's see what happens. So there's that running. Okay. Fetch data. There it is. Now we got it. All right. So cool, right? It works as two separate applications, and all the content of this application, right, the content that's in the browser, it's downloaded and in my browser now. So just like the concept with the PWA, with the Progressive Web App, my server isn't being hit to go get this data, to go get this user interface. Once the CSS and images are loaded, they can be cached, right? I could layer that PWA capability on top of this as well. And now, right, I only go back to the server when there's an update. Okay, and it, of course, because I told it refresh and get this data, this weather data from that function, it's always going to go and fetch from that function. So this is how we can build applications and have very low impact on fetching and interacting with the actual markup, CSS, and images on the server, because, right, this will be refreshed only when there's a change, and I am only retrieving the data. So for a Blazor application where folks say, oh my gosh, it's so big, it's 2 megabytes to download. 2 megabytes. After that initial download, right, if we take a look back in at that network tab, and we refresh that fetch data again, I'm only fetching 600 bytes. So once you're on the application, once it's out here and running, right? You can't see it. It's looking at 1.1 meg of resources, but it only transferred 240K because everything else was cached. It didn't have to go back to it. The only things coming back with 200s are things like fonts and style sheets and scripts. Those can be cached. We can turn that up and eliminate even most of that 240K. And that's a good thing. Let me go through some of the questions that we have here before I go to the next demo. Fritz on YouTube asks, can we use Sass with Blazor? Yes, you can. You can use Sass with Blazor. What I've done with my application is I've set up an NPM script that will do the Sass compilation and put the output of those Sass style sheets, SCSS style sheets, Sass. It put the output of those in the dub root folder in my client application. So I'll have some sort of I have a theme folder that has, here's all the Sass style sheets, and I have my NPM or gulp script that runs and delivers into this folder, typically in that CSS folder, the output, the resultant style sheets. This way you can use all your techniques, all of your style sheets that you like with Sass to work together and deliver that one uber style sheet, or several, but break it down however you see fit, and put that in there so that it's easy to see and interact with, and compress, right? You want to uglify some of that content before it gets delivered, minify it, that type of thing. So good question. Thank you so much, Fritz. Daniel on YouTube asks, how does authorization work with Azure Functions? So if you are using Azure Functions, there is a set of documentation that describes this, but you can add here, you can turn this over so that instead of it being anonymous, you can say that a key is required, right? Thanks. Go away. You can specify that a key is required, and that it's one of these types of keys to be able to access it. But when you're passing a key from a website into an API function, a clear text key like that it's available, everybody can see it and everybody can interact with it. So that can get published and folks can use that key without your knowledge. So I'm not necessarily a fan of using these. But what you can also do is you can activate authorization within your Azure functions. Where is it? Docs, Microsoft, Com, and authentication, Azure functions. I forget exactly. Here we go. I forget the exact syntax of it. Application settings. Authenticate users to signal our service. And there's bindings. Where? Come on, show me this. Sending the connection information back and forth. This isn't going to show me what I want. Storage accounts, static websites. Create a function app for authentication. And show me app service authentication. And you can wire it up to your favorite things here. So there are capabilities to do this so that you block access to it using these standard login techniques. So Azure Active Directory is going to be the most powerful option that you have available and easiest to wire up to the application. So that is Azure SignalR Service Authentication with Azure Functions. Okay. How is an Azure function different from an API? Well, an API that you might be building and working with, where's the website? Over here. That API that you might be working with is, yes, it's returning some content in JSON format that's been requested. The Azure function is serverless. Somebody else is running the server that you're deploying your little block of code to run in, right? So this block of code that runs to calculate my weather forecast, this is being hosted inside of another process. Now, that's because I chose the inline hosting one. I can also run that isolated, like down here, and I run my own functions worker process. But the syntax of the actual function is exactly the same. Okay. So it creates and sends response data. It's not exactly the same. Close that, and that. The function over here returns an action result, where over here it returns a response because it's sending back response data. You're standing up and managing it yourself. If you were building an API, you have to manage the entire runtime. You have to manage how it's stood up, how it's interacted with. Okay? But here, you're living inside of somebody else's runtime, and they're managing it for you. Will SaaS work with Blazor CSS isolation? No. No, it won't, because you've taken control of CSS rendering at that point. That's the choice that you've made. You could certainly try to render SaaS into the same file names as your components. You could do that. It's going to be pretty extensive process to do that. Might not be as, it's not going to be as easy as you think. What about JOT-based authentication, as that's what you're using for a mobile application, asks David on YouTube. There is a way to do it with JOT tokens. I'm not familiar with it. I would have to look it up in the docs to go take a look. So I'm sorry. We're going to talk more about JOT-based authentication next week when we get into authorization and authentication. Hi, Domi. Good to see you. Domi 4102. Sorry about that. Yeah, there is a way to do it, but so the difference is that the API works on a different PC. Well, on a different machine, right? It's working on a server somewhere, right? An API is you manage the runtime, the configuration of that runtime. With a function, with a serverless function, that's all being configured and managed by the hosting service. So, you can run, Murray asks on Twitch, you can run code from other native libraries, right? That's correct. You have to recompile those native libraries for the WebAssembly runtime, but you can do that. And folks have been calling back to this, to a demo that our colleague Steve Sanderson has been giving, where he's taken the SQLite source code and recompiled it for WebAssembly and deploys the SQLite DLL with Blazor as WebAssembly that runs in the browser. At that point, you have an isolated one-user database that's running in the browser. You can hit that thing with all kinds of data and interactions. There is a limit to how much data you put down in the browser, in browser storage. I think it's like 100 meg. But even then, that's kind of rude to load that much data onto somebody's browser when they come visit your application. Okay, so I've showed a little bit about how this application works. There was a question earlier, is the source code for my Hats application available? Let me show that real quick. Hats, C#, I am CSharpFritz, that's my screen name, all the places. And this is, of course, my Hats collection website. It's got a little bit of CSS here, so it'll flip these cards over, but you can see the crazy number of hats in this collection. The source code is available on GitHub, and this is an Azure static site. This is a site that fetches data from a database. It's even still got the Blazor starter application entry here. But API, client, shared library, and it's a little function here. It uses FaunaDB to go store its data, but here's my function that takes in a repository object and goes and gets the hats, returns that data. And I can go back here. You can see the client application. This is Blazor WebAssembly. And if we look at the pages, there's an index page here that has a loading statement while it's waiting for hats to be loaded. Say, go get those hats and display them right there. And for each hat in that collection, I wrote a little component called Hat UI. And if we go back to my components folder, there's the component. And this has everything needed to display a hat object. So I've got a div for that card. Here's the front side of the card here with the name and the image and when it was acquired. So I have it lazy loading the images from Azure Storage. And yes, I wanted to scroll back to the left. Thank you. Down here at the bottom, you see where that hat object is passed in, so it knows how to go and fetch and interact with that data. Present it right here. Gosh, thanks, Nino. Appreciate you tuning in. Hope you're having a great day there on YouTube. Take care. Happy to talk and interact with you about all cool things going on with C# and Blazor. Domi on Twitch asks, I have a question. I get into my last technical interview. Why did I use an interface into the API instead of an abstract class? Good question. So when this is, and I'll answer this, it's a little bit off topic. When you look at the API inside of my function here, I received an interface for a repository, even though I kind of force it in here and say, well, here it is by default. By using the interface, what this lets me do is not tightly couple to this type. In fact, I'm going to end up swapping out this type later because I'm going to move data off of this database and somewhere else. But what this lets me do, because I can put many interfaces on a class, I can receive and interact with and put it in here, and when I'm actually fetching my data, I'm interacting with that repository using its getHats method. Why an interface instead of an abstract class? Classes can only inherit from one parent class, where classes can have many interfaces applied to them. So I can have one class that can do many different things. So you get a little bit more flexibility by receiving and taking in an interface for this definition of a repository. Another technique that I've used in the past is I'll apply this interface for the repository, but the actual repository itself inherits from a base repository that's specific to that database provider. Maybe it's an Azure cloud table storage. Maybe it's a Cosmos DB that I'm interacting with, or Raven DB. Well, I'll have a base class, a base repository class that's an abstract class that knows how to communicate with those database providers, and I'll inherit from that. I'll have a concrete implementation, a hat repository implementation that implements iRepository in this case, that knows how to handle that getHats method, and it doesn't have to have all the minutia for interacting with loading and querying the database. That stuff is handled in the base class, and I can reuse that content inside of this the concrete repository that's implemented. Maluba86, coming back to C# and .NET after 2 years running another project. After .NET Core 3.1 and C# 7, what are the major features today to watch out for? Well, Maluba, you're going to run into, and you're going to want to start using .NET 6. With .NET 6 and now C# 10, you're going to want to take a look at top-level programs, minimal APIs, Blazor you're going to want to take a look at and learn more about, just like we're doing here. We're learning about Blazor. And those will get you pretty well into new APIs and features. Regarding the programming language, take a look at some of the new things that are happening around pattern matching. It's a powerful way for you to filter and structure your if, switch, and other statements where you need to interact and have branching logic. Okay? It's going to help you build applications that are a little bit more cleaner in how you interact and decide how to branch. All right? You're very welcome, Domi. Thank you so much for the kind words there. Maluba, all the best to you. Welcome back to .NET. Thank you so much for choosing to get back involved with .NET after 2 years. Okay, so that's the HATS website. The source code is out there. Once again, that is, if you want to go, there's nothing really out here. It's literally, I stood this up as my first Azure static website so I could learn more about them. That's hats.csharpfritz.com. The source code is available. Go ahead and clone it. You want to stand up your comic book collection website. You want to stand up your stamp collection or coin collection website. Have a good time. Grab that source code and change it to work with whatever it is that you might collect or you have a passion about, right? Maybe movie reviews, movie posters. I don't know. Have a good time with that. Thank you, Ferris. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for tuning in. Appreciate you joining us today. Appreciate everybody joining us today. It's always great to talk to folks in the community and have a good discussion about some of the cool things that we can do with .NET. All right. Next thing I wanted to make sure I covered, where did I go here? Right? Am I in here? Yeah. That's the starter application. Where did I leave things off? Yeah. All right. So we covered Blazor static website. So once you have that website, I should show you how you deploy it out to Azure. This generates it. Well, when you wire it up to Azure, and I'm actually going to go out to the portal to do this. When you wire this up to Azure, it will generate a GitHub a GitHub action for you. So if I go up here, I want to build a new static web app. And so let's create one. I can specify my subscription to put it on, a resource group, sure, wherever. And I'll call it whatever Right, C# with CSharpFritz app. Choose a hosting plan, free and standard. For most of the things that you're building, I would do free. If you're building an application where you need to have a service level agreement, choose standard. And where do you want your Azure functions hosted? You can choose different regions. Central US is just fine. You can have it deploy from GitHub, or you can have it come out of some other continuous integration service. GitHub's the easiest to do here. I'm going to get signed in here with, yes, get all the GitHub things, authorize it. Oh, are you kidding? All right. And now I can choose and interact with where this thing lives, and it will go and create GitHub actions appropriately for me to generate and build this every time I merge into my primary branch. I call all of my primary branches now main. You may call those branches, historically they were called master. We like to rename and call them main now. So you would just review and create. After you're done selecting these, it'll show you the syntax of that GitHub action you're going to create, and it'll set up that continuous integration process for you. And that's how I deployed, and this hat collection website is running. Okay, moving on. So hosted Blazor with ASP.NET Core. When you build and work with Blazor, of course, I've had WebAssembly running right on disk. Well, gosh, what if I want to run that and get pre-rendering running? What does that mean? What can we do there? So when you build an application, you can tell it that I want that Blazor WebAssembly application to be hosted. When we do that, it actually puts down very similar structure to what we saw there in the static website. I get a client version, that's the WebAssembly app. I get a server, and I get that shared library. This is the weather forecast demo again. There's my weather forecast class. And my client app is the WebAssembly application. The server app is set up initially to just host and run an ASP.NET server, and it just provides a place for that WebAssembly content to land. There are instructions, I'm running very late here, there are instructions that are available on the docs here that you can follow that will activate pre-rendering. It'll actually run and generate the content from your WebAssembly app when folks navigate directly to it on the server side. It will then hand off processing to the WebAssembly app, so you end up with a search engine optimized interaction on the server, and you get all that blazing fast interaction on the client because all of the code is downloaded and running natively in the browser. Does it allow you to connect remotely to SQL Server when using Azure static websites? No. You're going to want to set up an API that relays those connections over to your database. I use it in the ClipTalk application, as Ionescu points out there on Twitch. And ClipTalk has an API that makes that connection to the database and relays that as well. Do I demo how to host on IIS as well? I showed that publish statement. You can just copy things over. For these hosted with ASP.NET Core, I can take this exact same content, the server, because the client is running on the server, the WebAssembly runs on the server, and I can specify publish to IIS. I can generate a web deploy, and it will actually reach out. You can tell it where to write things out to. Otherwise, you can publish to a folder somewhere on disk, grab that entire folder, and copy it onto IIS, and it'll work just fine there as well. I've only got about a minute left. I'm not going to be able to show too much about Docker. Best way that you can get Docker running with your application is with Visual Studio 2022. Right-click, add Docker support. It will generate, based on your favorite operating system, a Docker file that looks like this, where it's going to set up a build container, take all of those projects into this. Yes, I know you're doing your thing down there. And it'll do .NET Restore. It'll build the application, and copy it into a final project here so that only the content for your application is in that resultant container, and you can publish that container to your favorite service. Do you need to get Visual Studio running behind a firewall? You need to get Visual Studio running behind a firewall. No problem, that's easy to do. It works just fine. Where do you add the certificate for HTTPS? You add it on the facade in front of this that's hosting your Docker container. Let me head over to the other machine. Let's wrap things up here. Oh my goodness. All right. Yeah, Visual Studio runs just fine behind a firewall. It makes HTTP connections out to interact with the... What? Okay. It makes connections out to interact, HTTP connections to work with NuGet and the like. You'll be just fine. But you typically want to stand up to the certificate question. You're going to stand that up on your hosting provider in whatever when you're using Docker, right? Whatever that hosting service is that's providing the proxy into there. Richard likes Blazor WebAssembly. Concern is writing a commercial app and keeping your code obfuscated. Yeah. Doesn't work. Any kind of commercial app that you deploy and send out to a client's machine, doesn't matter if it's obfuscated. Folks can reverse engineer it. Yep. That's the way it is. So you are not wrong. No obfuscation tool can completely guarantee protection. It's only like 900 whitelist for all the URLs. If you're going to lock down, you're going to run into an issue there, yes. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. I really appreciate you joining me here today. Let me go. Where's the music? There it is. It's over here. It's been a blast writing code and sharing content with you. Source code for today's project is out there on the GitHub. You can find that link if you're watching on YouTube. It's just below me here. You can go connect out and download all the source code for not just this session, but all the sessions. I hope you check it out and you learned something, and I'm happy to answer your questions in the comments here and, of course, out on Twitter. Let me see here. Yeah. Thank you so much for tuning in. Everybody who's watching on YouTube, hope you have a fantastic day. Come back, check out later, whether you're on YouTube or Twitch. We've got a couple more shows, including the Microsoft Docs show, the Docs team, answering questions about new documentation, new features they're building, talking about support, all that you're going to find in about an hour or so. They'll be joining us on this channel. And a little bit later today, I believe Mads Christensen's going to be hosting office hours for Visual Studio. Thank you so much, friends. If you're over watching on YouTube, we will see you next time. If you're on the big Twitch TV network, let's get set up for a raid. Let's get you connected to somebody else who's streaming and talking about tech out here that would be fun to listen to and learn from. Taking a look around the horn here real quick, I am going to get you connected and tuned in. You know what? I think this is a fine stream to get over to. Our friends at VMware are hosting a discussion right now about who should use Kubernetes. I'd like to learn more. I'm going to set up that raid to VMware Tanzu. Thank you so much, friends. I will see you tomorrow. It's the start of Minimal March over on the CSharpFritz channel on Twitch. No Microsoft tools. We'll be working at the command line on a Mac, a Raspberry Pi, a Linux-based laptop, and even a Google Chromebook. Throughout the entire month, we'll be switching between machines. I hope to see you then. Until then, take care, and good coding. Where'd that button go? Where is it?